Welcome back to the Old School Love Lounge. I'm your co-host, Stacey Julian.
And I'm your co-host, Tony Garcia. Welcome back.
Hey, y'all. We're talking about sex today.
Woohoo.
Are y'all ready?
Ready.
It might get hot.
Let's go.
a little hot. But I'm excited because we got a male's perspective today. And we have two exciting people next to us to talk about this.
We do.
Tony,
We do.
Who are they? Who are they?
Okay. So we have with us today Tariq Omari Walton, and he is a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist. And he is also the director of Insight Marriage and Family Therapist. He is currently the co-host of the Kings of the Heart podcast with fellow MFT and friend, Dr. John Hart. Together, they host and produce the Insight Guided Meditation podcast. Tariq is also the author of the book, It's Just a Damn Date and Why We Expect Too Much Too Soon. Also, we have with us Dr. John Hart, who is an initiative associate director of the Vera Institute of Justice. Dr. John Hart is a licensed clinical and marriage and family therapist. He is a clinical member of the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Dr. Hart is also a PhD in family science and an MS, and he has an MS in marriage and family therapy from the University of Maryland. He also has a BA in psychology. We are so excited to have both of them here today on the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you guys. We're excited too.
Look, take a breath.
That was a lot. Basically, they got credentials, y'all. They got letters behind their names. That's what all that means.
So before we jump into things, we had a few, rapid fire questions and we just wanted to throw at you.
Sure.
Trying to see where your head
Sounds
is.
good.
What you got for us? What you got?
Yeah. Ideal date.
Okay.
Maybe think about the first date that you went on with your spouses, maybe. John, we're going to throw it to you.
I think, when I heard it, I was thinking about, okay, what part of my life am I in? Like, was that pre-grad school, during grad school, or after grad school? But I met my wife towards the end of grad school, and I'm blessed to because you're married to the program when you're in there. But our first date was actually pretty chill. And she just came over to my crib, and we watched movies and ordered food, and we just talked, and we got to know each other. And it was great because it was actually the weekend right before I defended my dissertation. So It was a good way to, get my mind right. And ever since then, I didn't let her go. So
It was like a Netflix and chill.
Netflix and chill.
Yeah, pretty much. There was a couple crappy movies in there, but it was okay.
I remember that too.
That was an ideal date for us because we're both pretty chill and we love movies. So yeah, that's how it is for me. What about you, brother?
Yeah, we were a little bit different because we're both talkers. We're both conversationalists. So our first date was just walking around this lake, just talking.
Nice.
So we spent about 2 hours just conversing. We had seen each other for many times over the years and just really got affiliated like the week before. So it was just the first date to really get to know each other. And we just talked, So for me, a great first date is anyone where you have a conversation to get to know the person.
Yeah.
And not based off of their resume, but really just what kind of ways can you guys connect?
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, then, as you're moving forward, what are you really moving forward on?
Yeah.
You
That's refreshing because I think we put a lot of pressure on those dates in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a damn date.
It's just a damn date. Said it.
Yeah. Yeah. That is good.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
And it's inexpensive, too.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Both of those dates were cheap.
Yeah, they're very cheap. And I like what Reek said because like the most important thing about the first date is you wanna do something, whatever it is, to bring out each other's authentic selves.
Right.
Don't do anything that's so out of character because that's not really true or honest, but do something very authentic, you know, that makes both people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And also you're able to connect with one another.
Yeah.
When you get distracted by, let's say, movies or, different events and shows, you don't really have a chance to connect. And the whole point of a first date is to connect.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. I want to hear about you guys. What are your thoughts?
Tony?
Okay, rapid fire. Ideal date would be probably doing something physical. So, like maybe
axe throwing.
Maybe taking a hike or roller skating,
Okay.
something different, something unusual.
Some activity.
Yeah, some sort of activity.
That's cool.
Yeah, I like that.
I am the same way. I like active dates.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah, where
Nice.
you're doing something physically but still having whatever you're doing, you have an opportunity to get to know each other.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sounds
That's
good.
the point,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I love an idea of a walk. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If it's a nice evening,
Easy,
a walk.
That's always
breezy,
easy.
yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you're forced to talk.
You're
and
forced to talk.
So the second date could be a lot more, expensive or just more, engaging in a different way.
Yeah.
That first
Yeah.
date is really just about how you guys are connecting and communicating with each other.
Yeah.
You can't get past
Absolutely.
that. It's just downhill from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. Let's just do one more. One thing you learned about yourself through relationships.
That's a good one.
Wow.
One thing.
Patience.
Mm.
Patience. Again, I'm a conversationalist. I like to have engaging conversation. For some reason, I tend to attract women who like to do a very free flowing kind of conversation where they're just talking and they're not leaving a lot of room in there for you to ask questions or respond to things. And so I had to really learn to be patient and then also communicate how I'm being impacted by their way of communicating. So if you're if you're doing a monologue, right, as opposed to a dialogue, it can be draining. And so through my relationships, I had to learn how to communicate. Look, you're draining me when you do that. Can we have better dialogue and not just be limited to what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and not making room for me to share mine?
Love that.
I do. That's very good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, John.
That's
your turn.
also asking the other person to be a little bit self-aware.
Oh, for sure. And
right?
courteous.
Yes, and
Mhm.
courteous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. I think for me, what I've learned and have become amazing at, because I've heard my wife say it to other people about me, is that I'm a very accepting person, right? So I don't go in there really trying to change my partner or anything like that. I understand that there are things that we can improve upon, but in terms of actually seeing that person who they are and making them feel comfortable day in and day out, yeah, that's one thing that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
I do it very, very well, and I think it's because that's part of vulnerability. If I want to be able to connect with my wife, I always want her to know that she's fully accepted. She's seen and she's fully accepted. And even when she makes a mistake, like it's okay, and I'm still there to provide that emotional support. And that stuff is needed. So I think that's one of the things I had to learn over the years through relationships. And so by the time I got to my wife, I've just been amazing at it because it's technically the best compliment I've ever gotten in my life.
Yeah.
Like, not even joking around. When I heard my wife say that to a couple of people, when they had asked her, like, what is it about John that you love the most? And she's just like, yeah, like he fully accepts me.
Mm-hmm.
Like up, down, left, right. He fully accepts me. And yeah, I found that quite endearing because I came a long way with that.
Yeah. And the important thing about that too is when you're accepting of somebody, it also shows you whether or not that person is meant for you.
Yeah.
Because it's also accepting, okay, we may not fit. I'm not going to try and change you to try and fit into what I want out of someone.
Yeah.
But me seeing you for who you are may help me better realize that this may not be right for me.
Yeah.
So I know we're talking about sex, but I just have a question in regards to that, because my thought was, when does the accepting get to a point where they're doing something that is unacceptable,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have to say, okay, I need to,
Sure.
Nip this in the bud.
nip it in the bud.
Yeah. Well, the trick is, to be honest with you, is like you have to be able to separate when talking to your partner the difference between unacceptable behavior versus the actual person. When you attack someone's personhood, that creates
the character,
defensiveness.
right?
That's how you'll lose someone, and that's how the conversation goes off the rail. So I think your question is a great question at the end of the day, because I always have to teach my clients, you got to learn how to talk about behaviors versus personhood. What usually gets people in trouble is they blend the two and they get into a very defensive, high conflictual situation.
Right.
I do it very well. I hone in on the behavior. I talk about the behavior specifically, and I don't create any implications for the person themselves.
Right.
That's what makes someone feels very accepting when it comes to love or anything like that.
Yeah, it's that character assassination that gets
Yeah.
each time.
Yeah.
But the thing about that too is that when you recognize that something's going on with somebody that doesn't really jive well with you, you have to feel emotionally safe to even share that with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't feel
sure.
safe, then, there's going to always be a problem.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is you not saying anything time and time again ends up building resentment.
Yeah.
And that's the last thing you want in a healthy relationship. So you have to learn how to communicate, but you also have to feel safe to communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also, I guess, makes them think that their behavior is okay if you never say anything also.
Mhm.
Sure.
And they won't
Well,
stop.
how would they know?
Yeah,
Right,
how would
exactly.
they know?
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's an
Yeah,
unfair
yeah.
expectation that they're going to change without you telling them.
Yeah.
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 100%. That's a good question, though.
Yeah.
I think what Tariq just said is a great segue into our topic, because that communication in the bedroom
Mm-hmm.
and outside of the bedroom, obviously too, but certainly in the bedroom is important as we talk about pleasure, making each other happy,
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
on all things sexual.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
can we talk about how much of your work? You don't have to tell us specific names and stories, but
Oh, we can't.
you can.
Legally
You
we
can.
Legally
Right.
we can.
But how much does sex come into those conversations that you're having
All
with
the
your
time.
Yeah.
All the time.
yeah.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
avoid it.
You can't avoid it. Sex is, unfortunately, it's in the tier 1 of problems that could really harm a relationship very quickly
Mm-hmm.
and really plague it over time, where it could lead to breakup or divorce,
Mhm.
right? So tier 1, it's like your top 3 ones. It's like finance, in no particular order. It's like finances, sex / intimacy, and also parenting / raising kids. Like those 3 right there. If you don't handle those 3, you're going to be in some serious trouble. It doesn't mean that the other problems or issues aren't critical, but those 3, research has shown, does some significant damage if it's not held with care. And so, to even think about sex and intimacy and how people can communicate much better, I think that's what we do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. And I gotta be
Every
honest.
day.
Yeah, and I got to be honest. I appreciated the part that you added where we have to build context in. So it's not just in the bedroom. You got to talk about what's going on before you get in the
Yep.
bedroom.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people just think like you get in the bedroom and then that's where the problems are occurring.
Right.
But if there's emotional disconnection that is
Yeah.
happening before you get in there,
Absolutely.
there's no idea of pleasure. There's no motivation to want to even be touched by your partner,
Mhm.
right? And, there's just a lot. So, yeah, sex is one of the biggest topics
Mhm.
we have to address as marriage and family therapists. And I think the other thing I'll say as well when thinking about it is we really work hard in getting couples to become very comfortable to talk about sex. I think
Yeah.
it's easy for society to think that, oh, it's sex and yeah, it feels good, so everyone's talking about it. Yeah, everyone's talking about it, but it's very different when you're talking to your partner about it.
Mhm.
That's a very exclusive conversation that's very multi-layered.
Mhm.
And believe it or not, our years of being marriage and family therapists, not everyone technically knows how to talk about sex.
Right.
So our audience is mostly men and women over 50.
Mhm.
So what are some of the reasons why, and particularly for people this age, what would be some of the reasons why men and women, let's say over 50, would be uncomfortable talking about sex? Like what when they come into your office
Mhm.
and they have issues in the bedroom, what do you find are some of the reasons that they are uncomfortable? And who's uncomfortable?
And are there some common themes?
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Yeah,
add
I think
that.
everyone's uncomfortable
Yeah.
because it really comes down to a certain sensitivity their partner may have. A lot of the clients, when they come in, they do what we call predicting, which is thinking that when they do something or say something that their partner's going to react a certain way. And so again, it gets it back to the emotional safety. So they don't feel emotionally safe in being able to share with their partner how they're feeling or how they're experiencing things. They keep it to themselves, right? And so one of the things that ends up happening is they just don't talk about it. They don't do anything, but they don't talk about it. So you end up building all these bad feelings, going back to what we were saying before. You're not communicating how you're being impacted by certain behaviors, including not engaging intimately. And so what ends up happening, you just don't talk about it and end up building up these really, really negative feelings. And then that spills over into other areas of the relationship, right? But the point is you have to figure out, you have to communicate first about feeling safe. And that's one of the things that when we're working with clients is when you talk about, if you don't feel emotionally safe, you can't talk about anything else until you feel emotionally safe.
Mhm.
So if you're having problems in the bedroom and you're afraid to talk about it, well, why are you feeling afraid to talk about it? but I don't feel safe. I feel like they're going to respond a certain way. It may hurt their feelings. I don't want to hurt their feelings, all those things. Okay, we'll talk about emotional safety first. That way you can actually open up more freely about what's actually how you're experiencing things.
Yeah. That's definitely a good one.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think Tony and I have had conversations about how some women feel nervous or uneasy about vocalizing or communicating their wants and needs in the bedroom for fear of what their spouse may feel about that, you know, how they'll be perceived. Yeah. Maybe there's a ego that might be tarnished, you know.
I was just going to say that, honestly, Stacey. It's the male ego is a big deal.
Yeah.
But women's too, though. Women's too, though.
Yeah.
It goes on both sides.
But especially,
right?
no, I agree. But especially in heterosexual relationships, the male ego is a big deal, because any kind of deviation, any kind of conversation, most men, and this is where our work come in, because Reek and I do a lot of work exclusively with men on this, and that is building emotional awareness, trying to teach men how to relate to their partners, because just because your partner is bringing up a concern, or they want to, one good example is switching things up in the bedroom, right? Some brothers take it immediately as like, well, I'm not doing a good job. And it's like, no, like it's not about that, right? But the mind, the ego takes the hit, because each man, from a virility standpoint, from a performance standpoint, it's all about validating my ego around the idea of, oh, I'm handling business in the bedroom all the time. So anytime my significant other brings anything up, whether she and there are times we've seen some women do it very well in terms of communicating it, and the brother still will take the hit. And so that's something where Reek and I will have to like go to the brother on the side, pull him to the side, and do some work, because to his point, you don't want your female partner to shut down. Right. One of the best things about sex and intimacy is that exclusivity that comes with it. You're sharing it with this one person. But in order for her to have her needs met, and for you to feel competent and confident meeting her needs, there has to be a conversation. But if you block the conversation with defensiveness because your ego's taking a hit, or you don't know how to process what she's saying from an emotional standpoint, it's going to keep blocking it. And unfortunately, why would she keep bringing it up anymore? Right? Like, that's the unfortunate thing that can happen, because people do love each other, where it's like, well, I'm not going to bring it up again. Like, look at the way that he acted. He's so hurt. He's so disengaged now. And we've actually seen it play out where the minute someone, a female partner, has brought it up, sex will like stop or become so infrequent. And that tells her, unfortunately, I shouldn't have done that. When in reality, we got to come in and say, you didn't really do anything wrong. You as a partner in this relationship, you have a right to speak up. You chose this person because you believe that you feel safe with them to be able to have these kind of conversations. And sometimes Reek and I have to be bold enough to say, it's not about men versus women, but it's like the way you deliver it and handle it is pretty solid. But we now have to work with him to get him to a better place to respond better. Because once he responds better, you feel, I think any woman will feel confident talking to their partner about anything.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think you were going to mention something about the male ego, and we talked a bit about the content creator that we saw on TikTok, where the one where the guy talked about if women actually spoke about, what the things that they really did not or weren't happy about. Now, I don't think that he was specifically talking about in the bedroom, but just period, that a man's ego wouldn't be able to handle it. Like if they really were honest about 100%. The things that they were keeping inside, that a man's ego wouldn't be able to handle it. And I think, to Stacey's point, I think maybe that's why sometimes women just do not feel safe enough to really say, what they're really feeling in terms of how they're not being feeling satisfied in the bedroom, which leads us to the pleasure.
Or worse, they fake pleasure.
Yeah,
to make him feel like he's done a great job.
But this is the thing about it too, and I really don't like talking about ego so much. I like to talk about the insecurities we have. Because that's what you're really talking about.
Yes.
For a lot of people, it's not so much about their ego is so big that they can't handle it. It's the fact that their ego is so fragile they can't handle it. And recognizing that's what's happening oftentimes. When someone's having a hard time hearing what you have to say, it's because they're so emotionally fragile they can't handle it, right? And that's why they end up acting out. So it's not so much just about the ego, it's about that fragility, that emotional fragility. And so addressing, and that's one thing that we have to do.
I think the other thing I have to like name here too, because it's quite relevant, is any kind of trauma either person has experienced in their life. I got to be honest, is like, and to be honest, like not everyone, I think everyone likes to believe that like, oh, my partner knows everything about me. They may know about past traumas, but they may not know the extent of that trauma, right? So for example, I had a couple in which the female partner had experienced some level of sexual assault earlier in life. Now the husband knew about the sexual assault. He didn't know the extent of the sexual assault. So, and so we had to talk about like, not just like, oh, why didn't you say anything? It wasn't just about that, but it's the idea of, does she, and it could be men as well, like, is there extra work that the person who has experienced trauma related to sex, is there extra work that they need to do to then complement the work that we're doing to support building intimacy? Because without addressing any kind of relevant trauma, it's literally going to be hard because like that sits with people, right? And it can manifest in so many different ways. Like research shows that they're like even something like sexual assault can impact a woman's ability to like orgasm and all these other things. Yep. But if that's not addressed or even named, then she's feeling insecure to reach point, and the man who's not able to get her to achieve orgasm is feeling insecure. But what's at the crux at that? It's like there's a trauma there that has gone unaddressed for such a long time, and like now it's rearing its ugly head in the relationship.
And some people don't even recognize, even as a person who is a sufferer of the trauma, they don't realize how much the trauma has impacted them. Yeah, you know, they don't realize that they're bringing that into the relationship.
Exactly.
I was just thinking, like, I'm sure that many women probably don't know that the trauma probably is affecting their ability to have, you know, frequent and regular orgasms. Which leads to the pleasure gap.
Right. Which has a lot to do with that, I'm sure.
So let me read. So for the audience that may not be aware of the pleasure gap. So the pleasure gap is a term that speaks to the inequality between men and women and the ability for sexual satisfaction to happen equally, right? So here are the stats. So 39% of women regularly orgasm during sex compared to 91% of men. And women report less satisfaction and pleasure during sexual activity. And so I get the question that Stacey and I have for both of you is, we want to know, like, are men missing the spot? And I mean, that's no pun intended. no pun intended. Okay. But are they missing the spot literally? Like, are they missing how is it that we can address, like, I guess, closing the pleasure gap from a therapeutic standpoint?
And you mentioned part of it just now, because if there is some trauma there on one person,
there are actual conditions that exist that some women go through because of previous sexual trauma. Like I'm not making that up. Like there are actual conditions in which because of past trauma or other things, like there are struggles to have an orgasm, right? There's a disconnect between your body. So there are things, and to Reek's point, like if it's not addressed, then that it's really hard, right? And I think sometimes, and that's also the beauty about therapy, because sometimes I've had to frame to whoever, because men can also experience sexual trauma as well. To let them know, like, hey, we're now in a safe space. But I also have to push them and say, like, if we're really going to tackle this, I'm going to have to ask some critical questions here. Because again, most people aren't thinking they're not thinking about the trauma.
Right.
They're thinking like, oh, well, the P going to the V and then nothing. No, it's, I have to ask. And sometimes depending on the vibe I'm getting, I may have to ask trauma related questions regarding sex separately. I may have to call an individual session because who knows if either partner has fully disclosed either the incident or the extent of the incident. And so now there's shame that can block if I have them together. You know what I mean? So the reason why I brought up trauma is I'm not saying that that's all of the pleasure gap, but you'd be quite surprised. We've been in the game long enough. You'd be quite surprised how many people walk into our offices, men, women who have, and there is sexual trauma.
Oh my gosh.
So if
much.
that is not addressed, like we have a problem.
Right. And the thing about that too is that I would love to see the statistics about the women and their likelihood of orgasm versus how much sexual trauma they may have experienced.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if you have a number, if you have, let's say 45% of women, I don't know the statistics offhand, but you say 45% of women have experienced some kind of sexual trauma, then you start looking at that number, it's like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense. Maybe they are struggling to connect with their body because of the trauma. And that may be contributing to their ability or inability to orgasm or find satisfaction from sex. Yeah. So that may play a major role.
Yeah, exactly.
But then on the other side too, I want you to keep in mind that men's bodies are a little bit more simple, a whole lot more simple than women's bodies. 100%. Yeah. Okay, a 100%. Lot more simple. You guys got a lot of stuff going on down there. For us, it's like, a good friction. We're good. So it doesn't take much for us to be satisfied. And for you guys, there's a lot more complications down there, a lot more that you have to work on. That's why the statistics around why lesbian couples tend to find a lot more satisfaction because, women know women. And so there's more of a connection there, more understanding of what needs to work down there, how things need to work down there that guys just don't have.
That was the other thing I was going to speak to the pleasure gap. And I'm not even trying to be funny, but I think a lot of brothers in general think they know what they're doing, but they really, from an educational standpoint,
do
not know what they are doing.
They watch way too much porn.
So
way too much porn.
Come on now.
Yeah, way too much porn.
We say it on our podcast.
I got to just go jam it in there. She'll like it. That's not the way it works.
No, Rika's right. I say it on our podcast all the time. Stop with the porn. Like that's not reality. It's not. But from the idea of education, I had to push a few brothers over the years and say, like, you know what? Have you gone with your female partner when she goes sees the OBGYN? And they're like, no. And I'm like, you should really take your butt in there. You can probably learn some stuff because like all the things that's internally going on or whatever, it can help you to realize, Tariq's point. I didn't know all that stuff was going there. You get to see things or whatever. I'm not going to lie. Right. I remember when I went with my wife for the first time. I didn't go with any previous girlfriend. I'll admit it. I didn't go with any previous girl. When I went with my wife, my first time in there, I was touching stuff. I was like, but I'm just a researcher. I was like,
curiosity.
Oh, wow.
Right.
I mean, I understood it, right? So even from an educational standpoint, and then you add on porn, there is a significant misguiding that may be going on regarding that pleasure gap in men.
Yeah. So you guys are saying so much. I have so many questions. Okay. So I want to, let's just go back to the point that you made about the lesbians and the fact that when women are with women, the number goes up. Because I think that there's something to be talked about with that. Because my initial thought was, because you said women know a women's body. So then my thought is, if that's the case, then is there something to be said about the fact that maybe men are not educated? They don't know what they're doing. And so then you bring up the porn. And that, again, when Stacey and I were talking about this, having this conversation, we had a lot of questions. Is it because, my initial thought was, because men get education from porn. And that is
miseducation.
Miseducation. Yes, right. Miseducation, because that's not reality. And it brought me back to, I had this conversation. I don't know if I should share this, on this podcast, but I have two sons. And I remember when they were younger and they were discovering, sex and they were watching porn. And I got like a little upset. And I remember saying to them, listen, like, I don't really want you guys watching porn, but okay, like I get that you're trying to figure out whatever, but like that's not reality. Like this is not like what it is going to be like on the first time. Like this is not, and I was like, you're objectifying, I went there with it because I'm a mom and but but I was like, this is not reality. And then I thought, how do men learn about sex? Like, how do they learn? And then I started asking some male friends of mine, like, who taught you about sex? And they really didn't have any answers. It was kind of like, well, I learned from, just doing it. Or I asked.
Winging it.
Yeah, just winging it. And then I realized, like, there is no way that men really learn about sex. But for women, there's so much information for us out here, and we.
I have a point, but I have another point.
Yeah,
go on,
the education,
right? And so it's very much unbalanced,
just from an educational standpoint.
From an educational standpoint.
100%.
So I'm wondering, so trauma is one reason why the pleasure gap could happen. But let's say trauma aside, right? Like you have a heterosexual couple and you have a woman that is just not being satisfied sexually, then is it the fact that the guy's not, is it because he's not going to the OBGYN? Is it because he doesn't have the education? Is it because he's not talking to the partner about what the needs are of the woman? Is it because he's being selfish? Like, what is it?
It's all those things.
I was going to say
it's all of it.
It's all that.
It's not just one thing. I think the key point there too is the education. I remember it was New Year's Eve 2001 going to 2002. I was at a personal story. Huh? Yeah, why not? It was it was at a friend. We were at a friend's house. There was a bunch of us over there for a New Year's Eve party, and there was a Sex and the City marathon. And so I never really watched the show before, but they're watching it. And one of the characters said something about women having 3 holes. I'm like, 3 holes? What are you talking about? Right? And like, well, you got that one, and then that one. I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. They're really little tiny holes. And so, just even from that standpoint, there's certain things about the woman's anatomy we're not always familiar with, or we don't even think about, right? So just from that standpoint, you're missing an education. But then when you actually get into how things work, there's no real conversations going on.
Yeah.
So again, porn creates this unrealistic expectation of how things are going to happen and occur. And that's not real. We already said that.
Yeah.
But we don't have the education. We don't always have the understanding of, okay, well, if you do this, this may happen. Are you going to have that conversation with your 13-year-old? And a lot of people have a hard time having those conversations with their kids. You're not sharing what with your children.
I think,
and why is that?
Yeah, I think another factor that comes to my mind, Tony, is to kind of take it in a different way. Is I'm not saying all couples and all men, but I know one of the things that I've heard in therapy and working with couples is men, for the most part, not all, though in the bedroom regarding intimacy, whatever, for the most part, they'll run the same play. That gets stale. And a lot of them are just like, well, I get in, I get out, everybody's happy. No, not, but it's not so much about like hardcore selfishness, but it's like, hey, I got mine. So if I got mine,
right.
and right. She was moaning, so everybody won, but it's like, but no, like, I think again, like there's this disparity that exists in terms of some guys not understanding, like, it's good sometimes to switch it up. You don't have to keep running the same play. But Reek and I talk about this all the time. Like there are some brothers who we meet, they're so, and it may be a function of their careers or whatever, but there's some guys who are like very predictable. They're like A, then B, then C. Every single time. And if you're married to someone like that, that's horrible. Like, because what a lot of brothers don't also understand is that sex is not just the physical part. Like there's a pleasure part, there's a stimulation part, there's a connection part, there's all those things. Yeah. And one of the things that's also pretty interesting that I've seen in relationships is, let's say the couple's having a disagreement, argument, or there's some kind of disconnection. There are some men who are very confused. I'm going to use that word intentionally. That emotion, they're very confused as to how and why their partner still won't have sex with them. Because in their mind, they're like, but they'll even say things, I thought it was over, or it wasn't really a big deal. They don't understand that, like, it's a relationship. So if she not feeling you in this way, she doesn't want to probably be touched by you. But for them, they're literally like, but it was just an argument. But if that is impacting her differently, some guys are like, yeah, like, why shouldn't we have sex? Like there's this disconnect and a miseducation around what role or what is the true connection and association between like sex and the relationship? I think that part is undervalued. It's not fully addressed when it comes to even boys or even men. I think they just think sex is an isolated event that allows both people to feel good. And if she wants to feel good, and I know she want to feel good, she should be down with sex. Not that simple.
I think that I think what we can throw in here is that women need to be agents of their own pleasure as well. And even if we are more educated, we don't know what pleases us. Like if you don't know your own body and what brings you to orgasm, how do you communicate that to your spouse, to your partner? And I think we need to do better at that too.
I think that's well said.
And not be in fear of it.
100%. I think I really like that, Stacey, because at the end of the day, look, I also think sex is also a great opportunity for both people to teach each other. Absolutely. It's a bi-directional, like where it can get complicated is if one person feels like they're doing more teaching than the other. But I do like what you're saying for women and also for men, which is, hey, that's part of being in a relationship. Like, let's explore what else do we like, and we could do it together, or you could teach me. But that's also being open-minded too. Like, there are some people who are very rigid, unfortunately, and they're like, I only like it this way, and that's it. I don't want to do it any other way. And we have couples who really struggle with that. They're like, what do I do if my partner is so rigid about sex? They're not even open to even considering anything else. That is some hard stuff to deal with because again, it goes back to my early point about like acceptance. Like to your point, Tony, is for some people that's a deal breaker. I'm not even going to joke with you. One of my first couples when I left the program, I remember the wife telling the husband, because I think it was multiple things that was going on about sex, but he was playing around. I'll never forget. It was one of my first couples outside when I graduated. He kept playing around, kept thinking sex was a joke and, oh, she's this, and that. So I was like, all right, I got something for him. The next time I saw him, I was like, I got something to wake him up. He loves his wife, loved his wife. So I asked his wife in front of him to cut all the keying out. I said, ma'am, be honest with me. I said, I want you to answer what I'm about to ask you very seriously. No play around. Don't worry about his feelings because I was over it. I said, if he don't tighten up when it comes to like sex and really putting in the time and effort into therapy, what's going to happen? She was like, I'm going to leave him. That brother didn't smile not one time after that session. He took every session after that quite seriously. There was no more kiki because again, it could have been a function of his insecurities or whatever, but it's not a game. Like this is hard work. Like to really think about this, like Stacey's saying, this is an opportunity of growth and exploration. So if you're scared, be scared, but also know there's a good chance your partner may be scared too. But it's a collective experience now. That's what makes being in a relationship very exclusive. Y'all don't got to worry about anybody else. Y'all get to do this together. So if one night it don't go well, okay, let's regroup. It don't always got to be like, I never want to do that again. How many times have we hear that? Yeah, things don't go well. They're like, we're never going to do that again. No. But it's an educational experience. Like that's a bonding actually. Because just imagine, stick with it, you get it right, and everybody's happy. That's a tight bond.
That's a happy household.
Right, exactly. But the other thing about, the pleasure gap, one of the things that contributes to that is for a lot of men, and this goes back to like the education, their goal in sex is to orgasm, right? And so a lot of guys aren't really in tune with the process of getting there. It's like, okay, what can I do just to get there? Like, well, the foreplay, but even the intercourse itself. Oh, absolutely. It's like, okay, well, I'm in now. Let me just get it done. Let me just get to this point. And they're not really focusing on the pleasure part of it in between, right? So I often have conversations with men about learning to edge, right? Edging, are you familiar with edging?
We are.
And so for those, for our listeners and the watchers who aren't familiar with that, edging is basically, as a man, getting all the way up to that point where you're about to orgasm, but stopping yourself, holding back, and then kind of going back down, not losing your erection, but kind of settling down a little bit, and then going back up there again. And so what that does is helps you to prolong the interaction.
And that requires you having a lot of control.
Control on this one, yeah. But a lot of people don't have that control. A lot of people, even beyond just the sex, a lot of people don't think about the journey.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of people just want to get to the destination.
That's a good point.
And so if you have that mentality of, I'm just trying to get to the destination,
100%.
You're not worried about what's happening in between, and you're not really worried about your mate.
Yeah.
Again, this goes back to what John says. Some people like, I'm getting out. If you got mine, if you get yours, then cool. If not, well, you're late.
Yeah.
Well, can we talk a little bit about the foreplay? Because I think also like that's another part of a piece of the whole pleasure part that I think a lot of times gets lost.
Sure.
Right. In the whole sexual act that I think is real important for women. Right. And I think a lot of the foreplay doesn't even start in the bedroom.
No.
Right.
Nah, it's also that phone call, man.
It
The
does.
phone call,
I would love
that
to-
text
yeah.
message,
Yeah.
that like, I mean, you gotta, sometimes it's not even saying anything. You I've told people, just show up naked. Like, just walk into,
Right.
like, you know what I mean? Like, have fun.
Right.
Like, it's the thing about foreplay is it's not just about acts.
Right.
It's literally like being in the moment with your partner and really pushing each other to feel comfortable and be open. See, I keep saying open because I think a lot of people really struggle with the idea of like being open. But sex is really amazing because from a foreplay standpoint, you're adding nuance to sex. So even if you're open to foreplay, even if that's the only place where you can go, you've added nuance, but you got to do it collectively. You got to be open. Like, hey, what would you like for me to do? But I think the other thing that's always important is like really verbalizing when talking about foreplay or engaging in foreplay, communicate, right? Like what, and I always tell people, like, listen to what's going on. This is where we should be listening. If she's moaning, that don't mean stop. That means keep going. Like it's something's happening. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? Or or is it a position thing? If he or she's uncomfortable, you got to be able to read. Like sex and pleasure and foreplay is an opportunity to really pay attention, really dial in on your partner.
But okay, so the other thing too is that oftentimes people aren't really aware of the importance of foreplay and why it's even part of the whole experience, right? So when I first started seeing clients, we have a whole conversation around what it means to be in a healthy relationship and what are the elements of a healthy relationship. And the one thing that my client, I think only one time in the years I've been practicing, clients have brought this up. One of the most important elements of a healthy relationship is romance. And people don't think about romance. Like they're in such a bad state by the time they come see us, they're trying to fix everything else.
No, that's literally true.
But the romance part, when I start breaking it down, I talk about how romance is is one of those acts where it's very not just routine, but it has to be part of a it's like almost ceremonial, right? Yeah. Like if you think about a religious experience when you go to church. When you walk into the church, they have the incense, if you depends on what kind of church you're going to, but they have that incense burning, they got the candles, they got the music
playing, yeah.
It's all about setting a mood.
Setting the vibe.
Yeah. Like, why? Because they're trying to get you in that spiritual mode, right? They're trying to get you connected to whatever else is going on in that church. Romance is the same thing. So when you think about romantic acts, whether it's, the setting the mood, right? It's all about preparing you for what's about to occur. And people don't think about that. A lot of people get really, really impatient. It's like, I want to get in, I want to get out. I'm just here for the pleasure part of it and not recognizing that there's a whole system in place in order to prepare both your bodies to be joined. And people don't take the time to invest in that. And so, you want to set the mood, right? Even before you get to the actual physical foreplay, like we said, foreplay doesn't begin with the actual acts. It begins with what kind of mind state are you in?
Exactly.
So even the phone calls, I talk about maintaining a sense of romance all the time in your relationship.
Like flirting.
Like flirting for sure. For sure.
You flirt all the time. Like I even have couples who they're like, oh, but we got kids or whatever. I was like, I don't care. Like I got kids. Like I rub up on my wife all the time. She rubs up on me all the time. And the twins see it.
I get in trouble if I don't squeeze her booty, man.
Exactly.
I get in trouble.
And in my mind, I'm like, but what's the problem? At least the kids can honestly see, wow, like daddy really wants mommy. Like, like that's a positive thing at the end of the day.
Right.
So flirting is huge. It's like anybody can flirt. You don't have to be an amazing flirt. Just be a flirt to your partner.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, Rick and I have a joke and it's true. And my wife and I, like, I can imagine, for Rick and Shan, but it's like, even how you want to describe how to relate, whether it's foreplay or not, that idea of I'm a pervert when it comes to my wife. 1000%. I'm a straight up pervert. Like we joke on our podcast all the time. It's like, how endearing. Yeah. Like the word itself can be like out of context. It's like, oh my gosh. But you're like, yeah, I'm my wife's pervert. That idea of even throughout the day, which is what Reek is getting through. Yeah, like there's the ceremonial part. But I always got to walk people through. It's flirting. Like even think about all throughout the day. Call, text, rub up on them, all kinds of stuff. I mean, like, who cares? I had a session very recently, and we were talking about the same exact thing. And the husband was struggling around the idea of like flirting. I don't know what was going on, but he was just having a hard time. So I told him, I walked him through it. I said, look, because, you know, they got kids or whatever. So I said, look, I said, when she's in the kitchen, and it's right in front of the wife. I said, when she's in the kitchen, you go up behind her. I was like, you grab her ass. So you grab it.
Yep.
Okay. I was like, I don't care if the kids are looking, you grab it. And the wife busted out laughing. And so, but I needed him to hear it. I said, no, I said, wife, why are you laughing? I said, be honest. Why are you laughing? And she said, I would be annoyed, but I would find that very endearing. I was like, you see? I was like, but to him, he was like, oh, you know, but the kids, and I'm writing for the right moment. There's no right moment to flirt with your partner.
Right.
That's true.
There's no right moment to flirt with your partner. If I don't care what I'm doing. I can be in the middle of a meeting. I'll put that joker on pause. And if I want to go rub up on my wife, I'll go do it.
Yeah. Romance and foreplay are a ritualistic activity. If you think about it as a ritual, in order to better prepare your body for what's going to happen, the pleasure is going to be that much more intense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if two people, let's say,
just two? No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
That's
more than that.
Another conversation.
More than that is a podcast for another time.
100%.
But two people are dating, let's say, and they're learning each other, or, you know, figuring out about the other person, and the conversation of sex comes up. When is an appropriate time to have a conversation about sexual likes and dislikes, and what does the conversation sound like?
And we're in
and
dating
at what
mode.
point, you're dating.
Okay. I just had to,
you're dating.
So I always when I think about sex, intimacy, all of that stuff, I always like to remind people and just tell people, like, look, let it be multiple conversations.
Right.
Okay. There's so many angles to it. Right. Don't feel like on what is it, the second, third, fourth day, whatever, you don't have to talk everything out. Like, I don't really technically need, because that can be a lot of, like awkward, but just like some pressure, because it's like we're still vibing.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't need
I don't know if I like you enough, right?
Right.
We didn't even go there yet, right?
Right. So second or third date, too soon.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is my thing. You should be having conversations around overall intimacy before you start talking about sex, right?
Or just affection, just fundamentally like affection.
Right.
Some people,
do you even like holding hands?
That's what I was going to say.
Right?
Some people
Physical affection,
struggle with affection,
right?
And I think to that point, Tony, like you have to. That's where you start. Okay, like if we're kind of guiding people, I think in the first few days before you even get to sex, you got to understand what's the rhythm and pace of the other person. And one of the ways that you can establish someone's baseline regarding like sex or whatever, a basic affection. Do they like holding hands? Do you like to make out? Do people, and because some people will say like, I'm not really a making out person, or I don't really like to hold hands or whatever. Cuddling. Some people are like, I love cuddling. Some people are like, I don't like cuddling. I actually, I'll be honest, I actually need to know that before we talking about taking our drawers off. Because that don't even make sense for me, for us to even be talking about taking our drawers off, and you don't like cuddling.
It's gotta be the big spoon, little spoon.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ain't no spoon. Everyone's on the opposite sides of the bed.
Yeah,
right?
like ain't no
it's not gonna work for me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But I think Tariq's point, it's sex is so multifaceted that people should feel comfortable just pacing it out. I think if you rush very quickly into talking about it, you're creating like unintentional pressure that doesn't really need to be there, because we want both people to be comfortable. Remember, sex and pleasure and intimacy at its best is when people are comfortable. So it's not about don't talk about it. Pace it out.
Right.
Pace it out.
And a big thing for me too is definitions. Making sure that everyone's on the same page about certain things, because even the term freak, I'm a freak too. Yeah, you a freak, I'm a freak. Yeah, sure, I like this, I like that. Well,
then your person show up with the Barney costume and you're confused. Like, I didn't know.
What does that look like?
Right. So, even having the terminology and the right definitions, shared definitions around 100%. Things is important when you start talking about sex. Because you may have one thing in your mind on, what it is that you like, and you think this is a big thing. Another person's like, yeah, that's pretty vanilla. That's pretty basic. So you have to have a common understanding of what sex is and what intimacy is. So having that, but the big thing for me, again, going back to, intimacy. I often talk about there being 4 or 5 different kinds of intimacy. Of course, the physical intimacy, and that's not just sex. That's the touching, the cuddling, the hugging, all that. But you also have the emotional intimacy. You have the intellectual intimacy. You have the spiritual intimacy. you have the experiential intimacy. And you need to be tapping into all those different things, bringing balance to all those different things, because that actually enhances the physical. So you want to have conversations around, even just having conversations and the way that you're vibing and connecting with somebody is going to play a role in how you're going to connect with the physical. Sure. Right. So the intellectual is already there. Being on the same page around, your emotional needs is also going to play a role.
Emotional support's a big thing, especially for women.
I
have to teach all my
guys too.
When
we talk about, why a lot of guys in their 50s have a hard time, maybe even getting erections, it's not always about needing medication. Sometimes I'm not feeling emotionally connected to you anymore. Yeah. And so one of the reasons why I don't even approach you anymore is because all we do is argue. Yeah. And so why would I want to be with you? Why would I want to be with you sexually or physically if all we do is argue? So there's a major emotional component when it comes to sex. You have to be aware of that first before you start getting too deep into, what do I like in the bedroom? No, how are we connecting emotionally to make sure that we even match up well in the bedroom?
Yeah. And the other thing that I'll say, because there is a trend, right? There's been articles recently that's come up about, I think it's called like the gray divorce. There's, the relationships nowadays are also transforming for folks who are 50 years and above as well. Like if folks have been together for 20, 30 years, that's a long time. And so by the time you're in your 50s and 60s, you may not even be relating to each other the same way.
Oh, especially if you have kids during that period of time.
Like I have a few of my clients who they're not even romantically involved, but they're just really great friends now. Yeah. Like, and so the lack of sex is not always technically like a negative manifestation that something's wrong. But sometimes just people evolve, relationships evolve. Right. And so when we've been together for 28, 30 years, it's like for some people, when I have a few of my clients, some people are like, this is just my best friend. Right. So no, to Reek's point, the reason why intimacy, it's like there's parts of our intimacy that is stronger and then there's others that's not even a priority. Mm-hmm. Now, again, remember, everything is connected. Right. Because for one partner, that may be okay. But if another partner is like, no, I'm not looking for a friend. Part of being exclusive with someone is having sex. Now we have to talk about, are we going to break up or we have to get the divorce? See, these are like real life situations that we've seen play out. Yep. So it's not just so black and white as to how and why like sex is happening or not. Like even from the standpoint of just people just developmentally just grow, and it's not about growing apart, but I've seen with my own eyes, like people's relationships, they just transform. They become friends now. And so like, and I'm not saying this flippantly, but like, are you having sex with your friends? No. So that idea mentally that I now relate to my partner as my friend and only my friend, that I do things with spiritually, emotionally, and some of the other ones intellectually. But if the physical isn't there, for some people, we got to end it. For other people, they can keep it moving on because that person may have also evolved and said, you know what? I feel the same way too, but there's no really need for us to break up and get divorced, but let's continue it.
Right. There's still to fulfill beyond that.
Right. So the researcher inside me is always saying we got to be very careful about like what we mean about sex not happening. There may be some organic things that have played out naturally that isn't so negatively related to really understand relationships. And I believe people, not all, but we need to be very sensitive that for people who are 50 years and older, they may have been in relationships that have gone on for such a long time. It has probably transformed into something else.
All right. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is that sex on the first date is a no-no and that we should.
I would never say that. I would never say that. I won't say that.
There's value.
You just
in
might
waiting.
Not talk about it. You might not talk about it. You might do it, but not talk about it. Yeah. You might just experience it first.
I would never say no sex on the first date. Reek and I, we've known each other for such a long time. I don't even think we've even, agreed nor given a strong opinion even about the like, oh, like, do you hold out 90 days or whatever? You do what you feel comfortable doing. Yeah. Everybody got boundaries. We're all adults. Right. And if it's right, you go in and handle your business. I think where we come in is that even if it happens spur of the moment, one of the most mature things to do is even when it happens on the first day, we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Right. Do not walk off because then that's a different kind of vibe.
Yeah. Yep,
that's either a one night stand or that just communicates. But if we have sex, it doesn't mean, and that's what's tricky about the first date. It's like, for some people, we got to be careful. But some people, you have sex on the first date, they're like, oh, we in this.
Right.
Like, we're together. And other people, it honestly may not even be that. Be like, no, we just was vibing out. We had a good time. Yeah. So that's when we're like, you got to talk about that.
On the same page.
What did last night mean to you? But we
that.
shy away from that. We shy away from it because like, oh, it's awkward, or there wasn't that initial expectation of sex. So now that it's happened, well, I don't know. And to
what does this mean?
Yeah, what does this mean? So I always say, like, stop guessing. Open your mouth.
Talk about it.
Talk about it. What did last night mean to you? And if it means something different to you, it doesn't mean that it's such a disparity that we need to break this off, but we probably need to come to a understanding on how to adjust. It may be like, you know what? Now that I understand that, you know, I have more feelings for you or whatever, it's not about like we go our separate ways, but it may mean like, okay, let's recalibrate. I love that word. Let's recalibrate.
I find it interesting that it's not awkward to share your entire body with somebody, but it's awkward to talk about it afterward.
Yeah.
Like you're literally sharing your body with someone.
That's a good point.
It's a really, really great point because, again, talking about it is far more intimate.
Right?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, talking about what just happened. See, again, the P going into the V, like that can bing, 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 and it's done.
You've been doing that since before people even could talk.
Right.
So that's just nature.
But to talk about it means that we have to confront.
We have to intellectualize it.
And really address what is this about.
Right.
And then look, and both people can be mature and say, like, you know what? Even if the conversation ends out with, you know what, we're just very mutually attracted to each other. To me, that's a win.
Yeah.
Right.
Because at least we know, okay, there's something there, right? But then are we both interested in exploring what else we can build?
We did it one time. Now the expectation is that we do it every time we're together.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know each other
That's
that well.
a good point.
We're still trying to get to know each other.
That's a good point.
And instead of focusing on getting to know each other in other ways,
Now
in other
transform this into like repetitive sexual interaction.
But
Right.
also there's that double standard too, like for women. There's also that part that, okay, we've done it. And now there's like, well, what do you think of me? Now that I've given.
I think you were great. We had a really good time. All right.
It's like.
See you next week.
Well, that there's that double standard there that exists, for women where it's like, how do you view me now that I've already, we've had this moment, that we both shared, that we both given ourselves
100%.
to each other.
Right.
But
what I will say though is that, and again, I'm not saying this recklessly or flippantly and not even to be corny, but it's also more importantly before you ask that person, if I'm a woman, but how do you feel about yourself? Because if you willingly engage in it and there was no coercion and you was down for it before you even asked that brother, what do you think of me? What do you think of yourself?
No, the woman feels fine.
Yeah. Okay.
No, but you're saying the woman asked the man, how do you feel?
Yeah, like how,
before you ask that question.
What do you think of me?
Are you
now?
feeling guilty?
Yeah,
Where's that question even coming from?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you
like
feeling
now
guilty?
that we slept together on the first date, like how do you think of me? No, I know me. I'd be like, how do you think about yourself? I can answer that. But if I'm pursuing you, it's more, and it's probably the therapist inside me, I'm more concerned or interested in, how do you feel about yourself? Because I feel great. I willingly engage
I don't
in
think
this.
that may. I don't know if that's the norm.
Exactly.
It's not.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
it should
It's
be
not
more of the
gonna be
norm.
norm.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when it comes up, unfortunately, look, it's dialogue is dialogue. I think people need to have it. So even if a woman asks that of a male person, like after the first time of having sex, I'll be honest. I think in an ideal world, I think both people need to share. Right? Like, let's create some level of equity here. Like, how does he feel about himself? Because Reek's right. Reek talks about this all the time, and the idea of expectations. I think one of the easiest questions to ask folks is like, if and when that comes up is, before our date, did you have the expectation of having sex? Now that it's happened. That allows you to tap into the person's like mindset and psyche around, to his point, are you guilty? Because did you have the expectation? Now, not everyone, believe it or not, I'll be honest, not every man is walking around like the pit bull with the pink thing sticking out as well. Like there are men out here who really are about like, no, I don't want to jump into bed. But if they do, why isn't that question also applicable to him?
You know what would be a good question is that if men could ask, ask the woman, did she have an expectation that the sex would be good? That would be an ideal question.
Why is that? Break that one down. Why is that?
Just because we're talking about women being sexually satisfied, because I think so many women walk away dissatisfied.
But you walk into it hopeful. That's the question.
You do, and then you walk away disappointed.
Right.
Well, then what do you do with that disappointment? Like to me,
I
like
think that's why we're having this
yeah,
discussion.
But it's still a conversation you need to have.
100%.
Yeah.
Like, and again, so in my mind, it's like, if the vibe is there and if this is a potential person, then yes, then let's have follow-up conversations. Like if we're going to have sex on the first date and I did not satisfy you, now if you want to hold that against me and never see me again, that's your prerogative.
Right.
Well, maybe not if you have sex on the first date, but just if you
but if the first time,
on the first date or whenever.
Right. If the first sexual experience, it did not go well, definitely a conversation. But it's up to us, believe it or not. Is this person worth my time and going at? Because if it was so bad, some people are like, I never want to see this person again. I've had clients who say that.
Right. So let me ask you, is there ever the idea that maybe you're just not sexually compatible? Or is it that this is something that should be explored and tried to be worked out?
You have both. There's no one size fits all, right?
Correct.
And so what you're going to have is that, for some people, they're not sexually compatible at all, but you're not really going to understand that until you've had sex a few times.
100%.
Right? That first time, oftentimes, is going to be awkward anyway.
Yeah.
You're just going to know this person and, you're nervous. You've been looking forward to this. You're excited. So things may not work out the best that first time anyway. So you're going to want to give it a try. The only way you can discover whether or not you're not really compatible is not after the first interaction, but after the third or fourth. Because you get to know the person better.
And there's a rhythm. There's
an
understanding between both people around like bodies and movement and what folks like.
Okay, so I have another question. So then, knowing the statistics here, so like 39% of women generally do not have orgasms, right? So if you're interacting with a man the first time, and you're just getting to know each other, right? It's awkward. You're figuring it all out. Should a woman expect maybe on the first time that if you're just getting to know each other that you might not have are the chances, I guess?
No,
I don't think. No.
Don't go into it like that.
Don't go into it like that.
You're not going to do it because now you're in your mind.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
To your body already.
Okay.
You're already thinking about, I'm probably not going to have an orgasm, so you're not going to have one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So get rid of that expectation altogether.
Okay. So don't even go in with that.
Don't even go into that. Like there. That's why the expectations.
We're going in with the 91%.
No.
Don't go into it in the expectation
Don't go
at all.
no expectations.
Just go into it with the expectation
No expectations whatsoever.
We're gonna enjoy ourselves one way or another. Even if you don't have an orgasm, even if you're not fully fulfilled in the experience, you're going to have a good time.
Go in to have a good time.
But and where I was going with is to Stacey's point, there is choice and agency. So if it was so bad, let's say hypothetically, it really did not go well. But let's say
how bad did it go?
Right. but let's say technically this person and this woman and that man, they connected so well. So is he worth going at it again, teaching and having those conversations? That's where my mind usually is. Because Rika's right. The first time, you don't even have a rhythm. Right. You haven't really even talked about it. But if you have it a couple of times, then I think what's an informed decision is we've talked about it. I've showed them or whatever, and it didn't go well, or they were doing X, Y, and Z, or they were still, then that's a different kind of situation. But I don't think we would ever tell people to go, even men, to be honest with you. I've never gone on first dates thinking I was going to get laid. Never. Never. No. I don't. I don't, because I don't even know if I'm really going to fully connect with this person in person.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, not every brother is walking around like just some horn dog.
Right.
Like some dudes really are looking for connection. But I think what can get really complicated is if, I had a couple clients. It's like if folks wants to have sex but the other person doesn't want to have sex, whether it's the first date or early on or whatever, I think like that's a little tricky. Because again, that's where I'll be honest, that's where I've seen men, not all, that's where I've seen some men get dinged by women. Because again, the narrative out there is that all men want sex.
Right.
So why isn't he wanting to have sex? Like, I want him. Does he not want me? And it's like, well, you don't have all the information. You've only seen him twice.
Right.
You don't really know him yet.
So maybe for our viewers, like to close it out, maybe could you like sum it up in terms of like, for women, like maybe one of you could tell like the viewers for women, if you're, if women are concerned about making sure that they get the most, if they want to get the most out of their interactions with men sexually, what do they need to do in terms of making sure that they make the most out of the opportunity, in terms of like the steps that they need to take in terms of, dealing with men, if it's communication or what they need to say, or how they, get with their partner, or how they need to advocate for themselves? What are the things that they need to do? And Tyreek, maybe you can address this.
Can I, before you answer that,
okay.
I just wanted to mention, and I think for women, feeling about to have an orgasm, or being in the mode of sex and wanting that orgasm, a lot of it has to do with how relaxed and stress-free and safe we feel in that moment.
Sure.
Right, sure.
You know what I mean? And so, because we were talking on the first date, this is how it came to my mind. You're not going to be really relaxed with that guy because you don't know him like that.
And he's
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's
Very
not
true.
relaxed either. So if your body is not there, you're just really just having the act and, feeling the passion of it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done.
Yeah. And I think, of course, communication is always going to be
Absolutely.
my first answer. Communicating what it is that you need, what your expectations are. But going back to something you said earlier, you got to know your own body.
Yeah.
You have to know your own body. You can't communicate where you don't know yourself. And you can't have the expectation for somebody to figure it out if you don't know.
Nope.
And also being aware of, what your limitations may be. If you have a hard time connecting with, even knowing your body, but having a hard time staying connected. Like you have people who are highly anxious, right? And so they're in their mind all the time. And even when they're having sex, they're still in their mind about
100%.
things, right? So they're not connecting with the moment. Having really good sex to me is being present with each other, right?
Yeah,
and if you're not being present, if you're not emotionally invested in the other person's pleasure, if you're not really concerned about what they're getting out of it, only what you're getting out of it, of course it's going to be one-sided, So you have to be able to communicate. As a woman, communicate what it is, what your expectations are, or would satisfy you from your own understanding of how your body works. But then making sure that the other person is actually invested in you reaching that. Because some guys aren't invested. I don't know you well enough, or I don't care enough about you. I'm only here for this reason, for my own pleasure, that whatever you get out of it, cool. I'm not worried about that. There's not an emotional investment. So if you're looking for that, if you're looking for more pleasure, your mate needs to be emotionally invested in you. So communicating around that as well.
That's good.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to touch on maybe some things that men could do, like in terms of,
slow down. No.
Slow down.
Well,
that's good.
Yeah. I mean, I always like to start with the men where we always go on our podcast, and that is like, fellas, like, stop with the porn. Okay, like that's not realistic. To complement what Reek said, communication is very open. I think there's nothing wrong with people sharing their expectations. I think both people should be sharing their expectations. Like, hey, you know what? I expected, to have sex or not have sex or whatever. Like, let it be known. I think it's really important that men understand that a woman's experience regarding sex and intimacy is very different than ours on so many different levels that we talked about today. And I really implore men to really start taking the time now. Seriously, start taking the time to explore, read, ask questions, like lean on the female figures in your life. It's not weird. I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70 years old. Like, you gotta be open. Like, that's what I mean by being open. Like, the old dogs can't learn new tricks. I hear a lot of men say it. I'm like, but then why are you in here? You're in here with me because there's something curious about wanting to do something different. Right. And so be open about that. And I think for my rigid brothers out there, you gotta loosen up. Okay. Like, sex is fun. Flirting is fun. Foreplay is amazing. It's no one else is in the bedroom recording. I mean, unless y'all want to record. Yeah. Like, people do it all kind of different ways, but feel comfortable opening up, especially if the connection's there. I think to Rick's point, like, if it's not there, then let's focus on building that connection first. And then usually men start to feel a little bit more comfortable, right? But when that connection is there, go there with her, ask her questions about herself, not just like what her favorite color is, but if we're talking sex, like, ask her about affection. Don't just worry about the P going to the V. Like, what kind of foreplay does she like? What affection turns her on? What turns her off? I think what turns you on is great, but also what turns her off, right? Really open up conversations. I work with men on expand the conversations, brothers. Always expand the conversation. Don't keep it limited. You can't go wrong with asking questions. Trust me. It's a more curious standpoint. It will make her feel comfortable. She's more likely to respond better, but don't go in there just being very rigid about, well, this is how I am and this is how I like it. Well, then you'll be by yourself.
And the other part too, though, is the emotional intimacy, not emotional intimacy. The, what's the word I'm looking for? Emotional intelligence, right? Yeah. Being in tune with your mate. Yeah. Right. So many times, again, you have a lot of men who go into it just trying to get theirs and they're not paying attention. Like they're just focusing hard enough just to stay erect. Right. But they're not really in tune with how their mate is receiving them. Right. Yeah. So you have to make sure that you're actually in tune. Stay in tune. Be curious. Right. And when you talk about being open, be curious.
100%. That's why I said, be curious.
You want to be curious about that. And you're in tune. You're listening. You're taking all your different senses. You're watching. I mean, shoot, turn the light on if you have to. So you can see their face and see how they're responding to you. Yeah. But if you're only focusing on your own pleasure and you're only focusing on trying to stay in, you're going to miss out. You have to stay in tune with what's happening with your mate in that moment, whether it's foreplay or actual intercourse. Stay in tune and watch and listen to see how their body is responding to whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. I think the one thing I'll plug, because I also have a public health background, this is especially for men 50 years old and above, or just of any age, but especially 50 and above, really, really pay attention to your health, brothers. You have to, okay?
Man,
the drinking, the smoking, like some of the eating and all that other stuff, it like research shows.
Get your prostate checked.
Yeah, get your prostate checked. Like you have to understand blood flow. If you're dealing with high blood pressure, there's diabetes. Like really, like you can feel confident and competent about foreplay and sex, but hell, just relating with your partner regarding sex and intimacy if you prioritize your health. Right. See, I've conducted studies on Black men's health, and so you have to open your mind up that you can enjoy it. She will enjoy it even better. But if you're dealing with weight issues, if you're smoking, if you're drinking, if you're doing all that other stuff, you have to really contextualize that your health is also on the line as to how you may be performing. And a lot of brothers don't want to go there. They may want to blame her, or they want to blame something else. Take care of yourself, not just physically, but take care of yourself mentally. That anxiety Reek talked about, some brothers out here have performance anxiety. There's no need to disengage in those moments, right? But you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. So from a wellness perspective, I need the brothers out here to listen, not just slow down, but and educate and be curious, but also promote your own health. You will realize how pleasurable and how less stressful all of these things that we're saying today is actually beneficial, not just for you, but your partner as well.
Also, real quick too, even going back to the porn thing, men, when you're masturbating, if you're masturbating often, if you're masturbating a whole lot, then you are figuring out how to pleasure yourself very quickly. And so you're also not figuring out how to connect with the other person.
That's some good stuff.
So that's the thing there too. If you're trying to build a more physically intimate relationship with your spouse or your mate, then you may have to cut back on how often you're masturbating. But then when you have situations where you don't feel like you're getting enough sex, so you have to go pleasure yourself, well, understand that the more often you're doing that, you are only focusing on your own pleasure, so you get used to that. But two, you're forgetting that there is a longer process.
Because there's another person. Right. So it's a much longer process, right?
Yeah, it's going to take more time.
Right. It's not more video patience on and then you last 30 seconds and like that's that, right? Oh, and I think the other thing too is like men.
Slow down.
Yeah, slow down. And I think the other thing, post-sex, post-intimacy, brothers invest the time into that as well. That goes a long way. It really does.
Like that connection, that emotional connection.
Really connect. Like don't get up out of the bed, like or whatever. Like just really be present.
We got to wash off, man. We got to wash off. Wash off and come back.
But it's like, but you don't think she does either. So it's like, I got to tell guys, it's like being engaged and being connected is like also investing in the time right after, right? Yeah. No woman wants to feel like she's a prostitute.
Right.
Okay.
Be courteous. Go get it warm washcloth for her. How about that?
Yeah. Like do something for her, right? or pull the sheets over and say, we gonna lay here until one of us get up. Like, but just show her that I care about you and I'm still here with you after what we just did.
Right.
100%. And you'll see how she will relate to you after that.
Yep.
Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Many gems dropped right now. I hope it was helpful to you all. It definitely,
sure.
I learned a few things right here.
Me
Here.
too. Yeah, me too. Me too. Mm-hmm. So how can our audience stay connected with you guys? Can you tell them how they can contact you or how they can reach you if necessary?
All right. So we are the Kings of the Heart, Kings of the Heart podcast. So you can find us on all streaming platforms. We also have our YouTube channel, so you can see our videos of our podcast. So you can always go to our website, kingsoftheheart.com. We also have our individual pages and stuff like that too. So you can find me on social media as Tariq Omari. You can find him,
Dr. John Hart.
Right.
We're going to pop up.
Yeah. So, and then even our own websites, you can go to TariqOmariWalton.com or InsightMFT.com for me.
And the Relationship Counseling Center of Maryland. So that's the name of the practice. The website is RCC Maryland, spell out the Maryland.com. You'll find me there.
Yeah.
And we'll have that listed in the description.
Definitely in our description. Let us know what you thought of this podcast. Are you having good sex? Sex? Great sex? Let us know. We're curious.
And also about the orgasms too. That's what we really want to know, especially if it's anything close to what we've, the statistics that we put regarding the pleasure gap. That's what we're really curious about.
And if any of this resonated with you, just we'd love to hear your feedback on it.
100%.
So,
100%.
All right. That's it. Thank you for tuning in to the Old School Love Lounge. I'm your co-host, Stacey Julian.
And I'm Tony Garcia. And stay connected with us on Instagram and TikTok. We are at the Old School Love Lounge. And until next time, stay grown and sexy.
Stay grown and sexy.
I like that.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye,
Toodles.
guys.